every way, till finally, when they're finished with us, we're only thinking out of our heads in a Western logical way. And then we wonder why we're destroying the world and killing each other, because that's the product of an educational system. And I had the pleasure of meeting a gentleman, Jinan CK, about a month or two ago, that was introduced to me by Ilarion Merculieff, who you'll all know, who's appeared on Humanity Rising. And when we talked, he told me the story of how much he learned as an educator living among illiterate tribal people there in India, and the revolution in consciousness that he experienced as he realized that all the head learning that he had been subjected to in a Western sculpted educational system had actually deprived him of the most essential ways that people could learn. And that it was from the illiterate tribal people that he realized true learning continues to the present day. And that his real mentor in all of these things was Ilarion Merculieff. So we brought both of them together, and would love to have both of you open up your videos now and join the program. And I think we're going to start, because we didn't do our breathing and meditation at the beginning because Alon was pressed for time. We're going to start with our meditation now, and we've asked Ilarion if he would give us an opening blessing, and then we'll turn to Jinan, who will give us the story of what he learned from the indigenous tribal people there in India, and then have Ilarion comment. Then we'll have a dialogue between the three of us. So Ilarion and Jinan, thank you for your patience today as we got started with an update from Israel. And Ilarion, why don't you now give us a blessing, and then we'll just start our program on indigenous learning.
Okay, if we can take a deep breath and get grounded in our bodies. Aho, Tamaligaligasa Ti Tunisada, Masuan and Tunisada, Kano and Tunisada. Grandfather, Great Spirit, the Spirit that lives in all things, God, Jesus, one of many names. We thank you for this day. We thank you for this collection of people who are here. We thank you for everything that we have, including the people that love us and that we love. We thank you for Mother Earth and all the things that she brings to us as our mother. We thank you for all the lessons born of love inside and out of us. We thank you for the love shown in Mother Earth to what she teaches us. Like the eagle that teaches us that we too can soar high and see far. Like the salmon that teaches us that we too can come home to you. Like the owl that teaches us that we too can see in the dark. Like the trees that teaches us we need to be rooted in order to grow strong and be tall. These and many other teachings that are available to us if we have the ears to hear. We thank you for this day. Aho, Kahalakohanis.
Thank you, Ilarion, so much for that. It's always so good to just pause and just take in the blessings of the spirits, and so appreciate that. I now want to bring in Jinan KB. He's an educator in India who's dedicated most of his professional life to bringing reform in the educational sector there in India. And he is a good friend and colleague of Ilarion's. and has learned much from the indigenous Aleut people that Ilarion represents. So Jinan, welcome to Humanity Rising, and would love to just start with your story as an educator, realizing that you had most to learn from those people who were fortunate enough to miss the educational system to which you were subjected. Tell us about that experience.
Actually, I would like to call myself de-educator, not educator, because you see, actually, the problem with our attempts to repair education is that we are still trapped in the same paradigm and trying to repair it. So we are only replacing, I keep saying that alternative education is taking children out of the classroom, making them sit under the tree and teaching the same thing. So I think there is a fundamental paradigm shift that is required, and which actually happened to me when I started living with indigenous illiterate people, actually. So one thing that became very clear right in the beginning was that illiterates learn the world, literates learn the word. And that became a completely different shift. So I began to really explore two aspects, which is hardly ever explored in the Western paradigm, which is to actually study what is wrong with literacy. This has been hardly any attempt to understand, because there is a celebration of literacy without understanding what it has done to us. Now people are worried about what is, screen doing to children's brains. I think the same question we should ask: what did the screen, the screen of text, did to our brains? So this is what actually happened when I started living with illiterate people. I stopped reading completely. And because I was worried that, why is that all over the world, the Western knowledge is being, distributed. I don't want to call it taught. It's actually distribution that is going on, no? So that is what I was worrying that, all over the same subject, that is same Western education knowledge that is being, that's what we get. That is when I began to really explore that what is knowledge, how is it created, and how is it that illiterate people have been able to retain their knowledge system for several years, for centuries, not years, centuries. So that is when I began to stay with illiterate people, stopped reading, and I began to observe what they do. And from 91 onwards, I have been living with illiterate people and documenting what they do. And in that process, I understood that the nature has actually endowed us with a system, a proper grammar, a proper blueprint to understand the world. And that is what I was able to decode, because I have been documenting children from 91 onwards. And now I've also then started studying the cognitive damages of literacy. So these were two parallel explorations that I did. One I call the biological process of cognition, which is given by nature to understand the real world. And the other one is an artificial, because now we talk about artificial intelligence. I find artificial intelligence, I feel that the literate brain itself is artificial intelligence, because it has absolutely no connection with life, no connection with their senses. The tools that are given by nature is our senses. That has no role at all in the modern paradigm. So that is when I began to, really look at the whole crisis of modern education. In fact, I won't call it modern education, the whole modern life. And of course, it starts with education. And I believe it starts with literacy, because literacy was the point which actually created children to be inferior, or children that became dependent on the adults to learn. Otherwise, when you have your senses functioning, you don't need any mediation. You don't need a book to read. You don't need an expert. You don't need a teacher, because you are learning the world as, it's direct experience of the world. That has been denied after the printing press was established. So people usually have a confusion regarding, that writing was happening even much before. But writing was a skill and only a craft, and only few people could write, and they were like scribers, like you go to a artisan to get something done. So writing was done by very few people, and also the so it was very carefully dealt with, because there is one very interesting statement one friend once told me, that in the Indian context, when slokas are taught, they are never explained to the student. What they're telling is that because what we are doing in modernity is that we are explaining everything through the mind, to the mind. So what he was telling was that, you see, the understanding should take place within the whole being. So when the sloka is taught, it is stored as information, and no attempt is made to understand it. Understanding is something that should happen on its own. So this was a very, very key thing that I also found with what I call as the natural cognitive process, in which real world is the cognitive source. The senses are the cognitive tools. Playful exploration is the process, and self-organization is the way in which understanding takes place. What I mean by self-organization is the way we learned our mother tongue. Nobody taught us, nobody made an attempt to learn, but we all know how to speak our mother tongue. We did not make attempt to learn grammar. We did not make attempt to learn the meaning of words. So how did we learn mother tongue without any effort? This is actually the natural way of learning, and that is what is actually, that should be called as self-organization. So, I have been also engaging with the indigenous movements all around the world, and I actually been very, very depressed seeing that actually most of the exploration in the indigenous knowledge is again framed within the Western framework. And I found, because simple thing I want to point out is that, see, there is this notion in the Western world that knowledge needs to be transferred. Transfer of knowledge is something that they've taken for granted. But I find that in the indigenous communities, it is information that is transferred. Knowledge is something that is recreated. So knowledge is something that you create. It's not something that can be transferred. It's like digest food. You cannot transfer the digest food. It's the same thing. Comprehended understanding cannot be transferred. You can transfer information. So I was very lucky that that I came across Larian's video, in which I saw that it is called native knowing. And because I have been looking at this fundamental difference between modern knowledge and indigenous knowledge, or non-literate, language, the modern language and illiterate language. Illiterate language is more of verbs, whereas modern knowledge is noun-centered, I-centered, hierarchical. You see, actually, if you study just the language of modernity, you will find you can decode the hierarchy in that, the afterthoughts in that, the fragmentation in that, and everything actually can be decoded. So for the first time, I found Larian using knowing as a verb, because everybody uses indigenous knowledge as noun. So that is when I looked at this video, and it was mind-blowing what because that is exactly what I, as a non-indigenous person, was able to discover. That is what I feel very, 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 promising, that even if you don't have to be born indigenous, you can reclaim your indigeneity by stop reading. That's what it is, actually stop reasoning. You see, the thing with reading is that reasoning is actually, you get it from language. Reasoning is not a tool, it's an ability. It doesn't require, when you're actually in an experiential learning process, reasoning is not required, because what you see is what you see. You don't have to think about it. But reading demands you to imagine, to think, to, all that thing happens. So basically, reasoning is a tool that is used by modernity to conclude, and reasoning can only be done when you're engaging with what is known. You see, so it is literacy that brought in rationality. So rationality is not something to be celebrated. It is something that you should be worried about. How come we became just rational? You see, other very important thing I realize is that With rationality, you can only deal with the linguistic data. You know, somebody has to give you a data. Only with that you can reason. But if you look at the self-organization principle of indigenous conclusion, the data is collected from all the inputs, all the sensory inputs, which are not linguistic. All these inputs are taken in, and then an insight happens through which you understand. So you don't create an understanding with your ego. Understanding happens to you. So these are certain very, very fundamental, issues that I took. I don't want to take too much time. So maybe we can have a conversation around after this. So,
well, thank you so much. I love this notion that the illiterates learn the world and the literates learn the word. That is a profound insight. And I imagine in the end, it's a both and. But Ilarion, you're someone who started learning the world,
yeah.
and you ended up learning the word, but you never forgot the world. So you really have been an inspiration to Jinan for very obvious reasons. Why don't you talk to us about indigenous knowing as a verb, as you've used it, and how would you understand those differences that Jinan is talking about between the illiterate and the literate, and the experiential learning and the head learning?
Thank you, Jim. Anwan, Kalamakamat, Kalam Kasuda, Tingunangan Way, Unangan Asaftat Kuyach. I said, hello, my other self, which is the way our people greet each other every day. We are Unangan. I said, we don't use the Western term Aleut. We are Unangan, which means people by the sea. And we've lived out in the Bering Sea for over 10,000 years, and we're still there. And I said, my traditional name is Kuya, which means like an arm extending out from the body, a carrier of ancient knowledge into modern times, a messenger. And I was given that name by the last Kuya that was left alive amongst my people when I was 4 years old. And I was raised in a very traditional way. So when Jinan contacted me and explained what he was doing, I said, wow, finally, we get somebody who is not indigenous to US that we can relate to. And I thought that what he wrote was absolutely right. So it's really been an honor, Jinan, to know you and to work with you. Hopefully people will hear what he has to say and take it to heart and look at really critically what Western education is doing to people. When in my traditional upbringing, our understanding is that we are spirit beings that have taken human form. And as spirit being taking human form, we are easily traumatized when we first start off. Even scolding a child is traumatizing for a spirit being in human form. And therefore, the adults that were in my people were very careful about the way that they treated me. I was never treated as less than them. They were the adults, I was the child, and therefore, I'm supposed to follow what they tell me and what they do and all that kind of stuff. But the adult's job when I was a child was to create the space for a child to learn, not tell them what to learn, how to learn, or to define anything. And in that way, I could expand out to the maximum of my capability without the dictates of an adult. And in this way is quite ingenious. And I look for people of like-minded heart like Jinan, who can spread the word that there is something more than logic and rationality, that we're trying to solve the problems of the world with this logic and rational thinking. And this logic and rationality is concentrated in the head, in the brain. And when traditionally our people, and in fact, most indigenous people around the world understand that it's the heart that tells the mind what to do, and the mind's job is to implement that which your heart is telling you. Now we have got our minds telling our hearts what to do, and we have all the ills in the world today. You know, even Einstein said you can't solve the problem with the same consciousness that created the problem in the first place. But that's exactly what we're doing. And so even the state-of-the-art thinking, state-of-the-art technologies is nothing but the old regurgitated the new. And we're going to compete. And what we're doing, the elders tell me, you know, I work for a group of people called the Wisdom Weavers of the World. They are elders from all over the world. And they say that if we are spirit beings, and as spirit beings, we have energy. And as physical beings, we have energy. So that when we mentally, physically, and spiritually concentrate our energy and focus it in on stopping something, like, the people in Jerusalem, the wars that are going on, the violation of women, political corruption, all of this stuff, we're trying to stop it. And we're pouring our mental, physical, and spiritual energies into that. And what the elders are saying is that what that does is pour the energy into that which you're trying to stop, and it makes it bigger. That instead, what we must do is focus on the world we wish to see now, without reaction to anything. And, we're coming to the point where it's a question about whether or not human beings are going to live. Mother Earth, she survived for billions of years. She's going to survive for billions more. She doesn't need us for her to survive. It's a question about whether or not we find our place in the world that is a place of harmony with Mother Earth and all that is. And the only place, I maintain, that we can achieve that is from the heart. Our hearts never guide us wrong. It's impeccably right. It has patience, it has love, it has understanding, it has all these things that we want, but we don't know how to get it because we are separated from our hearts. And as soon as you separate from your heart, because the reason we did that, I feel, a long time ago, is that people did not want to relive the traumas that they had in their lives. And we don't want to go back to the pain. But what the elders say is that you do have to go back to it, but not attach yourself to that. You process it, you understand what it's telling you, and then you let it go, and then you can hear your heart. And that when we separate from our hearts, it's easy to separate from others. We call them others. And it's easy to separate from all these things that create war. We want to separate them and consider the people we're at war with as enemies and as something less than human. And we then separate from Mother Earth, ultimately. So what we need to do is go back to the heart. And really, the route to that, I feel Jinan has worked at something that may provide some of the answers to what we must do with our educational system, because this educational system, you know, you're taught from the very beginning, you must do what your parents tell you to do. And parents might discipline you and all that. I was never scolded as a child. I was never scolded by anybody. Anyway, then you go to kindergarten to postdoctorate degree, and we're supposed to listen to the authority outside of ourselves. And we have forgotten what personal authority is. We need both, yes, but we have to have personal authority first. You know, this is why in the world today, people are frustrated. The issues are too big for us. We can't affect it in any way. But what your heart tells you, your heart contains a gift for the world. We're all here at this time on Mother Earth for a reason. And this reason is to help save humankind. And that we have to change the way that the paradigms that we operate under now. Business as usual is not going to work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ilarion. And just circling back to you now for a moment, Jinan, you know, if given the fact that both of you are sort of illiterate and literate simultaneously, would you say that the future of true learning would be to combine both? Or would you, for example, just starting with you, Jinan, would your sense, based on what you've now experienced, is that we all should be basically illiterate, and those that want to become part of a literate profession, like you become a carpenter or you become a teacher, etc., that literacy would be a subset of learning rather than the whole thing? I mean, how would each of you, if you had to design the relationship between illiteracy as a way of learning, the world as opposed to the word, how would you combine the two together for an optimal learning experience?
Yeah. So, you know, I have studied what is called as the cognitive foundation. See, first of all, I want to say that the modern cognitive science has a lot of problems in that. First, they have not studied children to understand cognitive science. My whole focus has been to understand how children learn the real world. So one thing that I'm telling is that there is something called a natural cognitive foundation. So this natural cognitive foundation, the first layer is sensory inputs. The second layer is the word connecting to the sensory inputs. The third layer is the inferential, words. What I'm trying to say is that there is a system given by life to understand the real world that we must hold as our primary, system, and above that build language. For example, I want to tell you one more thing, that you see in the modern context, we talk about higher cognitive functions as if language is the cognitive, language is considered higher cognitive function. What I'm telling is that I talk about cognitive sources. I say language is secondary cognitive source. The primary cognitive source is the real world.
Mm-hmm.
You see, so in fact, as I'm telling you, I have thousands of videos and images on children, and I can prove everything that I'm talking to you using that there is a clear system given by life to understand the real world. So I would say that, and also the initial phase of a child's life, and again, there is a learning from cognitive science that we are born very pliable. So what we experience is what we will become. So because of the pliability and the flexibility of the neural system, if you are subjected to teaching all the time, you're subjected to reading all the time, you're subjected to help all the time, you become very fragile. That's what is happening in the modern world. You become an analyzer because right from childhood, that's what you do. You never create knowledge. Other thing is that when we talk about creation of knowledge, we are thinking of PhD guys creating knowledge. That is by reading more books. Well, you see, that's not creation of knowledge at all. We are fooling around with permutation combination. Creation of knowledge is the way how nature functions. Every living being is creating knowledge for existence, except the modern educated people. So naturally there is absolutely. So naturally we have to be very careful of how the cognitive system should form, the cognitive foundation should form. So the initial cognitive foundation should be of the sensory inputs, and later, once it is kind of shaped, it's a very well, maybe up to 12 years, you're very, very finely, that cognitive foundation is very strong, then you can use language. For example, like Larian, he had a very, very thorough grounding, of observation, it's so beautiful to listen to his video. I think if people are there, they should look at that TED talk, where he talks about how the elders were able to notice the sea lion from far away, whereas he was not able to do it. But then he understood that it is when the mind is absent, when you're truly present, truly observing, you're able to see. You see, this is the problem. And then one more thing, Larian, just give me 1 more minute. I want to say another thing, which is that if suppose we ask this question to the nature around, look, ask a tree, whom does he want, or whom does she want? Whether the tree wants a literate or illiterate. This is a question we must ask. And I'm sure nothing in nature will demand literate person to be anywhere near them. Even if you're an activist, environmental activist, a simple being, an illiterate person is far more connected to nature because he is not connecting with his mind. He is already nature.
Yes.
There is no alienation at all for an illiterate person. He doesn't talk about, activism and all that kind of stuff, It's all mental drama that we create, But we do nothing. We only talk about it, I find this, especially this art people going around and painting all around, It's useless activity, And they think they're very sensitive. You ask a tree whether the tree is requiring such an activist or even a traditional wood cutter, somebody who cuts wood. A tree will demand that even if he's cutting the trees, he knows that he is doing it for a in a very peculiar situation, So sorry, I've taken my time. So
no. This is brilliant, Jinan. And as someone, with graduate degrees and a PhD, extremely literate, I am feeling completely denuded by your remarks today and realizing I need to go into the forest that's behind me and sit for 10 years, and then maybe I'll be able to get to where Larian started.
Actually, reasoning should stop. It is not reading that is the problem. Reasoning. See, conclusion is the problem. We are forcing conclusion. That is a problem. You must read, but don't make an attempt to understand.
Yeah.
So when I hear somebody telling me, I don't try to understand it. I don't force understanding. I let understanding takes place.
Yeah. Well, Larian, talk to us. Just tell us a few, lay out how you, as a young boy, as I remember from previous occasions, you would sit and watch them fish, and they would know so much about the comings and goings of the sea life and the animal life. And to Jinan's point, that the essence of the illiterate is that they are nature. They're not separate from nature. Therefore, they're open to nature, and that's the reservoir of true learning. So as a result of that, they understand the bears and the fishes and the currents and so forth and so on completely naturally without any rationality at all. And you experienced that as a young boy. So describe that world.
Well, thank you, Jim. Yeah. what Jinan says about children is so true. I recall seeing some kind of study, I can't remember, I can't give you the citation of it, in the UK, which was studying the intelligence of children. And what they found was that every child was a genius at one point in time, true genius, every child. And that when they got older, they somehow lost it. And I feel that it's because of the way that we're treating children in terms of educating them. You know, I learned through my people in supporting the space to give me the space for me to learn. I would be given a freedom that very few children today would be given, where I could go anywhere on the island. I was born on a very small island in the middle of the Bering Sea. And I would go anywhere, day or night. One of the things I loved to do was to watch the seabird, because we were a mecca for seabirds, about 2.5 million seabirds at that time. On an island that's 12 miles long and 5 miles wide, very small island. And with only 7 cliffs that the birds can go on, these are migratory seabirds. And all kinds of species, red-legged kittiwake, black-legged kittiwake, thick-billed murres, common murres, least-ockless, crested-ockless, tufted, puffin, horned puffin, you name it. And I loved, when I was 6 years old, I loved to listen to and be with these birds. And so I went out underneath the cliff 3 miles out of the island. I had to go there in the dark by myself at 6 years old, 3 miles out. To get there before the birds woke up and start leaving the cliff ledges. And so I would just listen to the cacophony of sound. When the birds wake up, they would make this big circle. Each species would make a circle in front of the cliff, waiting to collect members of their own species before they go out foraging. And there must have been over 10,000 seabirds under that cliff. Can you imagine? And they were going in every which direction at different speeds. They were going diagonally left, diagonally right, up, down, you know, and they were different speeds. And apparent chaos, that's what we would call chaos. But the birds even clipped a wing. They did never, none of them ever clipped a wing. And I wondered, how did the seabirds do that? And I said, well, they don't think. So my 6-year-old mind, I said, okay, I'm going to train myself not to think. And it took me a couple months, but I got there. So I could not think for hours. I can still do that today. And when I did that, that's when the magic happened. I could feel animals, feel the plants, feel everything. And so the hunters used to take me out hunting for sea lion, as Jinan mentioned, and they would know where the sea lion was. We'd wait for hours and hours, sometimes 8 hours. And there's 180 degrees of water because we're an island. And they would know exactly when the sea lion was going to appear and where. And I thought that was magical. But I learned how they did it because I decided to use what I learned from the seabirds to the sea lion. And lo and behold, that's when the magic happened. I could feel the sea lion before it came. And I applied the same thing for fishing, and we'd fish for halibut, hook, line, and sinker. And I could tell you the size of the halibut as soon as or I can tell you when it's going to bite the hook. And I could tell you when it bites a hook, if it's hooked by the lip or the jaw or the side of the body. I can tell you what size it is. I can tell you whether or not it's male or female. I can tell you how it's going to fight on the way up. You know, these are things that a good hunter, good fisherman need to have in order to do these things. And we need this kind of intelligence now in the entire world. Every single human being is needed now to bring that intelligence to play, to activate in the world.
Yeah, well, that's extraordinary. And that leads to a question, Ilarion, for a highly literate culture that's completely disengaged from nature. What is the pathway back? How do people who've never experienced what you began with and are so distant from it that they don't really know even how to relate to nature, what would you say is the pathway back?
Okay. Yeah, first of all, someone mentioned, how about the tar sand, and what do we ignore the things because we're going to follow the world in which we want to see? And the answer to that is that, yes, we must stop these things that our hearts tell us is wrong or not correct, but do not pour our mental, physical, and spiritual energies into it. Instead, we focus on that which we want to see. Okay, well, the way back is to go back to the heart. The heart will tell you, I mean, there are no more gurus. Everybody now is a guru. The answers are in your hearts, but so few people are connected to it that we've got the results that we have today. And so to get to the heart, it takes a lot of work. And, it takes things that people don't want to do, which is to access those things that traumatized us, process them, and let them go. The Hopi Maori say, let go the sides of the riverbank, move toward the center, find those who have done the same, and celebrate. And what that means is letting go inside the riverbank means letting go of all human attachments. Move to the center means moving to your proverbial heart center and the center of the river of life, because it knows where it's going. We don't. Find those who have done the same. That means find those who have had the courage, like you did, to jump. And those are going to be, according to the elders I work with, going to be the new definition of tribe.
Beautifully put, Ilarion. Beautifully put. Thank you. Jinan, what would you
what
add
I
to
would
this?
say is that, to me, not reading was one very important thing. I think the most important thing was learning from children. I actually, when I adopted a child, I took 3 decisions. Never say no to her, never lie to her, always follow her. Let her lead the way. But of course, in the modern context, we must remove all kinds of destructive things. Toys are very dangerous to children. Toys. Children don't need toys at all. Kitchen should come down. People should actually start cooking in their houses. Children should see processes. Whereas modern people are very product oriented. Because that is the way whole capitalism is product oriented, In fact, the first product is knowledge. So we have to go into, I feel, learning from children, And in fact, that is what I've been trying to collaborate with as many people as possible to create an event called Celebrating Life, Celebrating Childhood. And in that childhood, what I mean is that even our own childhood should be reclaimed, because we are actually a distorted, damaged people, actually. The literate who have been undergone education, we're very highly egoistic. We think that we know everything, always in the mind. So there is some way we must understand that children are the future. They are nature incarnated. Learn from nature. This is what I feel. So I have actually been doing a lot of very interesting do-nothing parenting workshops, getting parents to actually stop doing much, Remove toys, that's the first thing. And our notion is that we have to give freedom to children. I believe that freedom is existential. It is given by life. We have taken it away. Now that is, we are going back. You see, this is what modernity is thinking, We are giving freedom. Who are you to give freedom? You see? So I think a whole lot of rewiring is required here. And I think children are the future. This is what I feel. And why I say this is because every child is born with the potential of a indigenous beingness, of a knowledge beingness, a beingness of nature. So every generation is giving us a scope that, oh, now we can reclaim. But the problem is that all modernity is so much against nature, against life, against children, and so egoistic. It's going to take hell of a lot of time to make them understand that they are actually there to teach you. They are not, we shouldn't be conditioning them, So this is what I feel, And because, if you look at most of the parenting workshops, they're all about, ill-treating the children in more and more different ways. You don't make any change. The change should be made by the child. What I'm telling is the opposite. Child has no problem at all. You are the one who has a problem. Because you see, the fact that we don't know how to parent itself shows what is wrong with our species, You see?
I love it. Do nothing parenting.
Parenting workshop.
Jim, Jinan is absolutely right. When I asked my elders, what is this about culture, and they said, our teacher for our culture with song, dance, rituals, and all these kinds of things is we look at the 2-year-old child, and the 2-year-old child teaches us what we must do. And what that means, of course, is that children are pure funnel of energy. We are energy beings, remember. So they, I saw 2 children were 2 years old. They were playing with each other, and then all of a sudden they got mad at each other and they were fighting. And then the fight stopped after two minutes, and they were continuing on playing. What they're doing is letting go of all the energy that comes through the human body. And that this energy, if you keep it inside and stuff it into yourself, it's like my elder Rita Blumenstein said, it's like it creates a toxic pool that will eventually kill you. And that you've got to be able to, at all time, release the energy that you have, both positive and negative.
Well, we had a wonderful session yesterday on consciousness, and the assertion was basically that, there's this undifferentiated pool of consciousness, as you're pointing out, Ilarion, that we're all born out of. We all have a different configuration of that consciousness. And so we all have different attributes that are derived from the consciousness. And one of them, as you're saying, Jinan, is freedom, that this is an existential way that humans naturally live. It's not something that is given. And so it's a beautiful notion that you're both bringing in. That is, it is from the mouth of babes that truth really emerges, not from the parents teaching the kids anything. That's what destroys their genius. That's such an important notion. And when you think of what's happening in education today, I was on a plane flying back from Washington on Sunday, and there were some little children, and without exception, they were 2 or 3 years old, and they were all glued in front of a television screen. They all had their little iPhones and so forth, and so you could just see they were being mesmerized by electronic media. And from your point of view, Jinan, that is precisely the wrong way to bring a child into a living, dynamic world. Now, we're drawing to a close, but given what you're saying, what would be a good age if we all educated our children in the way that you're both suggesting, with do nothing parenting, no toys, let them explore processes more than products? I think that's a beautiful way to do it. When would you bring literacy in? When should
No, you see,
uh,
I think if we leave children completely free, they will actually, we have done very, very interesting research on drawing. See, drawing itself, I ran a school for 3 years and I let children, and children were doing whatever they felt like. And we documented everything that they did. So we documented the drawings that children were doing. And we found to our surprise that drawing was actually nothing but a cognitive activity to understand the world in terms of two-dimensional space. So drawing that way combines toy making and play. You see? So what I'm trying to say is that if we leave children without any pressure, they will pick up how to read and write the way nature has intended them to learn that. So we don't have to force anything to them. If there is reading and writing in their ambience, see, for example, children in Bangalore slums pick up 4 languages by the time they reach 4 years. Nobody is teaching them. They just picked it up, 4 languages. So I have also have friends who have, whose children picked up reading and writing with no effort at all. It was there in the ambience. So
gotcha,
so the thing is that we need not worry about when they would learn. How they would learn is the issue. That are they able to connect the real world to this? See, for example, drawing that way. Now, see, I don't think anybody has looked at drawing as a cognitive activity. Drawing is as personal self-expression. It's part of art. I find this is absolutely a wrong way to understand drawing. In fact, I'm just writing a book called Seeing with Hands. Because actually drawing is a cognitive activity. So what I'm trying to say is that, see, initially we must get children to ground them to the real world. Their senses must awaken. See, actually, other very important thing about human being is that unlike animals, we are born with potentials. We have to be awakened to what our potential. What I mean by this is that there is an interesting story of many feral children where those children, a child was looked after by dog. So the child became dog-like. So this is the thing with human beings. They are born with potentials and that has to be awakened in them. And their potential is really very big. But there has to be right condition. And so what is happening in modernity is that instead of awakening their potential, we are conditioning them.
yes.
So that is the primary thing, So
Yeah.
I see, one is not against digital tools or literacy and all that, but they must not control us. They must not become our masters.
It's one
We must know
aspect
how
of
to-
learning. It's not the totality.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Beautiful.
What I
Beautiful.
would say about that is, first of all, the word educating. That implies that there's an educator, which is not you, but somebody else. So
Mhm.
again, this is not educating. This is native ways of knowing, indigenous ways of knowing. And so that's important to keep in mind. The second thing is that parents, what we can do now is create the space for a child to learn. Someone mentioned, going out to the nature. Yes, take the child out there. Don't tell them what to do. Don't try to be the answer to recreation. All those kinds of things. We've got a lot of things going against the proper education for children. We give them technology without thinking about what it does to us. And TV, which isolates us from the world, and we're stuck in this nibble world. These are things that we have to be aware of. Just create the space for a child to learn. And then by the time they're 6 years old or 5 years old, when they go to kindergarten, they already have the grounding in who they are.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the most important thing is for them to be grounded in who they are, not from anybody's influence, not from anybody's teaching. And then you can go on. That's the way that I did it, and I've already gone through up to graduated from the University of Washington. So I'm very literate according to Western term. but I still have that grounding in my tradition.
Yeah, and I think if I had to distill what you both are saying, there's no necessary contradiction, but literacy needs to be held within the context of illiteracy, that the word needs to be in the container of the world, and that our children need to be encouraged to explore initially in a sensory way the world around them, and the curiosity that they experience will guide them into the kinds of learning that they need for whatever world they're in. I mean, you were in the world of birds and sea otters and all kinds of things, Ilarion, and that's how your learning was initially sculpted. I was raised in the formative period in the island of Taiwan with a lot of Chinese kids. I naturally picked up the Chinese language. No one taught me Chinese. I just learned it. And we were running around in the rice paddies all day. And so this is really, really beautiful. I found it very challenging and very illuminating, both of you. A quick final word, starting with you, Jinan. Any final words that you want to say?
Yeah, no, I find that, it is very important that we can, some of us can get together and relook at the modern knowledge paradigm, especially cognitive science, and decode it and tell what is wrong with that, because unless we do a very fresh research on children as creators of knowledge, this drama is not going to stop. Because see, even I find a paradox in the way they are building artificial intelligence. Now the scientist in MIT is learning from children in order to create artificial intelligence, which will be used to dumb them down later. You see, I mean, this is what is happening. Education, they are telling that children are very, very intelligent. They are learning the world, and now they are making intelligent machines. So I think what we can do as a team is to actually build a fantastic cognitive science based on how children learn. And look at what is really wrong with the modern explorations on see, for example, embodiment. I think embodiment is the latest drama that the mind is playing. This embodiment is an invention of the mind. You see, and now everybody is using it. So this is all a mind game, and I find that the problem is the war is between mind and the body, and we are all victims of that. Modernity is nothing but the mind dominating the body, and the mind is continuously taking over that. So artificial intelligence at its height, artificial womb, everything artificial. So we are not required anymore. See.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, and really want to acknowledge everything you're doing there in India to revitalize that educational system by learning from the children. Well done, Jinan. I look forward to having you back.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ilarion, any final word?
Yeah, I work with a group of elders from all over the world. We met in 2017 in Hawaii, in Kauai, and to answer two questions. What is the state of the world as we see it now? And two, what must we be doing now? And we produced a 14-minute film that was launched by Reuters in 2020, seen by over 80,000 people the first day. And these are messages from these elders about what we have to do now, which is go to the heart telling the mind what to do instead of the mind telling the heart what to do. And that when we do that, we will provide real answers to the world's issues. Right now, we're meeting with our elders, and yesterday they unanimously approved to accept an invitation from the Colombian elders. They have a national organization in Colombia now of elders, and these elders have asked us to help them realize a dream around the world by creating a vibrational field, if you will, vibrational field that will be an alternative to the existing conscious field consciousness field that we have now. And that we need to do this worldwide, and it needs to be done simultaneously. So if you're interested in that, visit our website, www.wisdomweavers.world. And we're going to put up articles based on our elders' discussions about this that we're having right now on that website. So you might want to join to receive our newsletters about this happening. And now we're going to reach out to the entire world, both native and non-native, to bring this to a reality in maybe about 3 years.
Thank you so much, Ilarion. Thank you so much, Jinan. Hope we can have you back. This is a vast domain. You've turned learning and education upside down for us today. You've done a great service. This is revolutionary. And I feel both challenged as a literate Western man, and I also feel completely inspired by what you're offering to us. So thank you both so much. This will do it for us for today, everyone. You're welcome to the after session chat. You'll see the link in the chat box. Jinan, it would be wonderful if you could stay on and join the chat group. I know, Ilarion, you need to go to your other meeting. And then tomorrow, we're going to hear from a woman, Heather Ashamara, who has been trained in the Toltec indigenous tradition of northern Mexico, who will be talking to us about how that tradition can inspire and empower women to become the warriors they need to be in our world. So that'll be tomorrow here on Humanity Rising. Thank you, everyone. Bye for now.
So how do I get the link for joining if I want to join?
You'll see it in the chat box right there. Can you see it there? Stan, just click on that link in the chat box.
Okay, but I will join after 10 minutes.
Sure.
That's okay, no?
Yep, sure.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.